Overthinking is a pattern of constantly analyzing your future for potential problems and attempting to pre plan solutions to whatever crises you think you might face. And it's usually driven by anxiety, insecurity, and a belief that without an all encompassing, comprehensive plan for every challenge you might face in the future, you will fail dramatically and your life will fall apart. There may have been some catastrophizing in there as well. Cognitive distortions usually come in combo packs, so that's just kind of how these things go. One of the biggest challenges we face with overthinking is that it can not immediately seem like a problem or a symptom. Overthinking has this self reinforcing tendency to it, meaning that once you start doing it, it's hard to stop doing it because it seems like it's actually helping you. It seems like it's working and it seems like it's saving you from constant disaster that's looming just around the corner if you don't have your super comprehensive plan for every single thing that's going to happen. The reason that it's self reinforcing is because it usually plays out something like this. You have a concern about something that might happen in the relatively near future. You start to think about this concern and you get really anxious about it and you prepare for it and you plan for it and you'll think, here's what I'll do if this happens, here's what I'll do if this happens, and you ruminate and you obsess, and it either doesn't happen or it does happen, but it turns out pretty okay. And you then think, the only reason that that either didn't happen or wasn't a crisis and I handled it fairly well was because I was so prepared. Was because, you probably aren't using this term to describe your own behavior, but essentially was because I engaged in overthinking. And so what this tells us is we didn't actually overthink. We are thinking the correct amount because we avoided disaster. And that voice or feeling inside tells you this only worked out because you were so prepared. And if you hadn't spent all that time worrying and wondering and being concerned about how this was going to go, well, then it would have been a disaster. And you're the one who stopped it from happening by engaging in that pattern. Another way that I like to look at this is using what I call my mechanic metaphor. Let's say that every time you had a problem with your car, you took it to the shop and you just handed the shop $10,000 and you said, please fix whatever is wrong with my car. Here is the payment. Pretty much can guarantee you 100% of the time you do that, you're going to get a call from your mechanic in the relatively near future saying, hey, your car is fixed. Come pick it up. And so you'll show up and think, that's great. I solved the problem. Now I have a car again. Everything's good. The issue with this scenario, obviously, isn't that it doesn't result in a good outcome. It's that it's an overcommitment of resources. It is very unlikely, unless you drive an incredibly valuable and exotic vehicle, that whatever was wrong with your car actually required you to pay $10,000 to fix it. And so you get the good outcome, but you pay too much for the good outcome. This is the same problem that is present in overthinking. We don't experience a disaster, but we spend so much time and so much mental energy being prepared for what we think might happen that we really just sit in the depths of our anxiety and our despair for a long time. We suffer way more than we need to, and we almost certainly miss good pieces of our lives or enjoyable parts of our day because we were so wrapped up in our own rumination about what we thought was going to happen. I know that your mental energy, your thoughts, they're less tangible than your money, so it might be a little bit harder to think of it in that way, like, oh, I wasted my thoughts on this thing. But they are. They are a tangible and finite resource. You are going to have a limited number of thoughts today. I do not know that number, but it's not infinite, right? You won't have 700 billion thoughts today. There's going to be some certain number, and that's all you're going to get for today. And what those thoughts are focused on can have a dramatic impact on your mood, on your functioning, and on your general happiness level and quality with your life. The more you focus on the negative, on the chaotic, on the stressful, on the sad, on the problematic, the more you will feel those things. And when we're overthinking, let's be honest, do we overthink about the awesome parts of our lives? No, we should. Like, that's not a bad idea, but we don't do that. We overfocus on the stressors, we overthink about the problems, and we get locked in on the stuff that scares us and freaks us out and makes us mad and that we think is going to be a problem. It also erodes your trust in yourself. So overthinking, this might be a weird way of conceptualizing it. When you're overthinking, you're basically being a helicopter parent to yourself. You are acting like you have no ability to solve problems in the moment or adapt to situations or think on your feet. And you're essentially communicating to yourself that the only way your life isn't going to fall apart dramatically is if you pre-decide every possible step. And this actually long term increases your anxiety because your perception of what you need to function and thrive is constantly going up and up and up. Lastly, it pulls you out of the present moment. Nearly all of the potential issues that you're overthinking about haven't happened yet. And many of them, arguably most of them, will never happen. Roughly 90%, I don't remember the exact methodology behind this study, to be honest with you guys. But there was a very comprehensive study on what percentage of the things we stress about actually happen. And it was like 10%. That means that 90% of your anxiety and your stress and your worry is literally about nothing. It is about hypothetical, theoretical situations that may but probably won't occur in the future. And when you get so locked in on those, you tend to miss the parts of your life that are good and worth experiencing and real and actually happening right here and right now because you're constantly solving time traveling problems. So, that being said, here are 3 ways that you can break out of overthinking patterns. All of these are pretty quick and easy. You could implement any of them today and start to make some progress in this. That's important because there's not a lot of quick wins in mental health. This is usually a long game that we're playing, and anything that gets you quick results is definitely worth considering. The first is what are called skillful distractions. Skillful distractions operate under the principle that, well, there is no way to take something out of your brain, and I don't mean literally, like physically. I mean, there's no direct way for you to stop thinking about something. We don't have a mechanism for that, and in fact, it's counterintuitive. And when we try to stop thinking about something, we paradoxically end up thinking about that thing even more. But we do have an indirect way to stop thinking about something. Your brain has a finite amount of activity happening inside of it at any given time. You only have so much attention that you can distribute to whatever is going on in your life. And by refocusing and redistributing your attention to something fun or relaxing or silly, you change the contents of your mind, and whatever you were really stuck on before, it's not that it goes away, it simply has less space to occupy because more of your brain is now taken up with something else. So let me give you a practical example. You're thinking about something terrible and crazy and chaotic that might happen in the future, and you can't stop thinking about it. So this pie chart, which right now just looks like a circle with the word chaos in it, represents the contents of your thoughts in that moment. It's all chaos. Now let's say in the midst of this chaos, you decide to get on TikTok, which is back, I understand, and watch cat videos. Now, your brain looks like this. There's still chaos, but now there are also cats in the chaos, and frankly, that is an improvement. Now let's say, while you're watching cat videos, you call your friend or your family member or your kid or whoever happens to be around you, and you say, hey, come watch cat videos with me. Now the contents of your brain looks like this. And we're making some improvements. Now you're probably having a pretty decent time. And that might seem incredibly oversimplified, but that's what a skillful distraction is. We can't take things out, but we can put things in. And because it is a limited capacity container, the more things we put in, the more the stuff we don't want gets kind of squeezed to the outside and eventually, at least for a period of time, gets forgotten. The second technique, somewhat similar to a skillful distraction, but a different spin on it, is to use mindfulness techniques. All mindfulness really means at its core. I know that word might conjure images of like meditating in a dark room and focusing on the candle with a single flame, and that certainly can be mindfulness. It doesn't have to be. All mindfulness means is you take the process of choosing what to pay attention to, which is something that is normally done automatically and subconsciously for you, and you take conscious control over it. Usually, you're trying to redirect it to the present. And so, again, you're going to notice nearly all of your anxiety is about the future. is about things that might happen, is about hypotheticals. Some of your anxiety is something that is happening right here and right now, but if we're being honest, for most of us, it's a relatively small proportion of it. And simply by bringing your attention back to the present moment, just ask and answer the question in your mind, but what is actually happening right now? If I let my mind wander right now, there's all kinds of things I could be worried about. Is my business going to make enough money this year? Are my kids going to the right schools? Are we all going to stay healthy? Is our house going to fall apart? When is it ever going to snow? It's February. I almost said it's January. It's not even. It's February in Iowa, and my kids want to go tubing, and there's no snow. I could worry about a million things, but what is actually happening right now? I'm making a YouTube video. Is that bad? No. That's literally the only thing that's happening in my life right now. And the majority of the time, if you guys just dial into the present moment, what's actually happening right now is usually either good or fine. Maybe not good, but like it's all right. Things are usually fine. And so much of what we get so concerned about doesn't even happen. It's optional distress. It doesn't even need to be there. If you only worried about the stuff that was actually happening, your distress would get cut by 90%. Now, that is probably lofty. I don't know that anyone can just not worry about the future at all. But even if you don't get 90%, if you practice mindfulness half the time and 45% of your anxiety goes away, that's a pretty good ratio, isn't it? And the third technique is a form of exposure and response prevention. So exposure and response prevention is typically a treatment technique for obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. But overthinking, even if you don't have OCD, overthinking functions very similarly to what's called pure obsessional OCD, which is the obsessive and ruminative thoughts, but without a behavior connected to it. Overthinking is a repetitive mental pattern designed to avoid or mitigate a potentially disastrous consequence in the future. That's pretty much what pure obsessional OCD is as well. And so we can use a lot of the same techniques. With exposure and response prevention, you don't really need to worry about the exposure part because the exposure part is anxiety, which is just going to happen to you. But what we do is we set limits. And so you're still going to let yourself worry. You're still going to let yourself think. You're still going to let yourself plan, but you're going to limit it somehow. And since the behavior in this in question here is thinking, really the only way we can limit it, because we have to quantify it, the only way you can really limit it is with time. You know, you can't say I will let myself have 30 thoughts about this because how do you operationalize a thought? Like that's kind of a ridiculous idea. So maybe you say, you know what, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes. For the next 15 minutes, I'm just going to deep dive into my anxiety. I'm going to freak out. I'm going to panic. I'm going to stress. I'm going to set a timer. And when the 15 minutes are over and I've had my panic, then I have to go do something else because that's all the time I'm going to devote to this. And as you do that consistently and things don't completely fall apart, this one will take a little bit longer to really like play out to fruition. But when you limit your overthinking and your life does not get dramatically worse, as a result of not spending hours and hours ruminating and preparing for every potential consequence, eventually you build up that confidence in yourself because you start to realize, I am not having all these problems that I assumed I would have if I wasn't hyper prepared for everything all the time. It's essentially the only way that you can prove to yourself that you actually are overthinking and overplanning and not just being prepared, which is what our brains usually tell us as a rationale or a justification to keep us stuck in these cycles of overthinking. So I hope these 3 techniques are helpful to you. Let me know in the comments if they were. If you guys got any other ones, because this is by no means an exhaustive list, these are just my 3 personal favorites. Let me know what you do to overthink. Help your fellow YouTubers and leave a comment letting us know your favorite techniques, and maybe you can help someone today with that knowledge. Take care, and I will see you next time.